Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our May general membership meeting. This is our final meeting of the school year. It's hard to believe. The next meeting after this won't be until September. So, but welcome. We appreciate you joining us this evening. We have a great mental health forum for Mental Health Awareness Month. And first, we will go over some PTSA business. We'll turn it over to Mr. Doug Nelson for his principals update and some information about summer programs at Wootton. And then we'll turn it over to Dr. Shruti Japee, our moderator, and our four experts that have joined us this evening. And I think we've had some pretty big events that came up over the last month. We celebrated our 50th anniversary, 2 years late because of COVID, but it was great having an in-person event. And so that's what we were waiting for. It was at Lakewood Country Club. It was really a fantastic event. We had a great turnout, probably had about 100 folks that came out from alumni across the decades. We had former faculty, current faculty, current and former administrators, parents, and students. We had performances by the Wootton Jazz Band and the Wootton Acatonics a cappella group, and it was really just a great night. And we had our silent auction, and we raised about $6,500 from the silent auction that night. So that did really well. Did very well. We had a lot of great donations from so many different places, and it was really was an amazing evening. So thank you for those that participated. Thank you to those that purchased from our silent auction, and those that donated to the effort. So, but a good celebration, and we did post the montage from that night, if you didn't see it, on the Wootton PTSA website under the 50th anniversary tab. And then the next big event that we had was just last night. We hosted the Board of Education visit. We had 5 clusters. They were Rockville, Richard Montgomery, Poolesville, Churchill, and of course Wootton, and all of their schools. So the elementary, middle, and high schools were all participated. The first hour in the evening, we had a reception. It included the Board of Education, all the principals from these schools that I mentioned, PTSA leaders, the Montgomery County Council PTA leaders, Sydney Katz from the Montgomery County Council, and others. It was a really great turnout. Our SGA leaders gave our Board of Education and other folks tours of our building. The Board of Education has heard a lot about our building through testimony, and so it really gave them a chance to see the building firsthand and understand our needs for our building, the ADA accessibility issues in our building. And, our students are very passionate and great advocates. And so I think they made a good impression on the board. And then the second part of the evening was a school showcase. We set up each cluster and all of their schools within the cluster. They each had a separate area. Everyone brought many different types of things to showcase, to show the highlights from their school and talk about needs. The board members rotated around the room. We had the Wootton Acatonics perform again. And it was really a packed evening down there in the cafeteria. We had a lot of not only all the principals and PTA leaders, but we had a lot of families come and visit and learn about the different schools. So it was really a great evening. And it was great for Wootton to be hosting, and we made a very strong impression. So we were very pleased with that. We can move on to the next slide. And coming up is our last Principals Coffee Chat of the year. It's going to be this Friday at 9 a.m. Message will go out tomorrow. So if anyone has any questions, you can share those questions for Mr. Nelson to answer at the coffee chat at 9 a.m. And then we'll turn it over to Mr. Nelson for his updates.
Awesome, Brian. Thank you very much for the plug for the coffee chat. If you all want to join me, make sure you submit those questions. They always go first, so there's an added benefit if you get your question in advance. I address those first, but hopefully we'll have some joining on Friday for the final coffee chat of this year. That's hard to believe. Just a little bit to share with you all. I'm going to share my screen, I hope. Actually, Brian, you know what? It's not going to shit. This happened the last time I was on this computer, but I have them so we can do these verbally. That's not a problem. But just a little bit about principal updates that I prepared for this evening. And then there's also a summer school update. So principal updates this week at Wootton, we have the SGA Spring Project Week. Their theme is get up, get out, and get active. And so there's events in the Commons each day during lunch. Tomorrow is the large advocacy fair, which also connects to a lesson that's going to be presented at advisory. And then it's going to culminate this week with a color run. So the kids have worked really hard on this. So it's an exciting week, and it is the culmination of all the work of the SGA for their spring project. Another thing that I would just like to share on Thursday night at Wootton is our annual awards night. And that is where students will receive academic or scholarship acknowledgement awards, and that will be in the auditorium. Individuals would have received an invitation over email to attend that night. So please know that that happens this Thursday and is by invitation. Next week at Wootton High School, we have the annual celebration of the arts, and specifically on Wednesday, Thursday in the evening, there's going to be a lot that is happening at the school. If you want to come by and see all of the amazing artwork and performance, things that come out of our arts department are really, I think, second to none. So if you want to come and see some of the things that have been worked on in this exemplary department, please know that that happens next week on Wednesday and Thursday. And then just a little note for everybody, senior turn-in. So we put out information to the senior class of 2023, and the structure for turning in technology is a little bit different. So I just want to go over that so this information is shared with the Wootton community. Next week on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we will do a call for seniors to turn in their Chromebooks to the Media Center based on their alphabetical last name assignment. There's also going to be a last call on Thursday and Friday. So if for whatever reason you can't make it when you're assigned, there's going to be 2 days to turn in those Chromebooks on Thursday and Friday. What I want the seniors really to know is you want to turn in that technology. What you don't want to do is come in on the Tuesday that you have returned from Memorial Day break, and then you are trying to tackle either turning in technology or something that you still owe the school. Get that wrapped up in advance. So then the only thing you have to do on graduation rehearsal day is focus on practicing for graduation, because we're going to be trying to wrap all of these things up that morning before then graduation on Wednesday. So please see your email for details on that for seniors specifically. And for all other students that might have a Chromebook or technology, please know that you're going to keep those Chromebooks. They do not get turned in annually. Also, everyone at Wootton now has updated technology, so you have a newer device, so there's no reason to turn it in or exchange it for something else. And all other grade levels, you're going to keep that device. We are also putting a plan together for our new incoming families, our rising 8th grade families. Some of them might be participating in summer school, which I'm going to go into next. We will put together a plan and communicate that with our new families, because they might need to get a device for summer school before we hand out new devices to the incoming 9th graders right before school starts. So they're going to have 2 opportunities to get some devices. Also, Brian, the last time we were together at the executive board meeting, I was asked to bring back an update about what programs we are offering for summer school. So I'm going to do an update on that and kind of review those. The first thing I want to begin in sharing with everyone is the 2 pathways of summer school. So they've been in place for a number of years now in MCPS, but they really can cause some confusion because we call it summer school, and yet really 2 different avenues of summer school exist within the system. So the first one to be aware of is what we call Central Summer School. Central Summer School's primary purpose is to provide students an opportunity to earn credit or redo credit. And that is facilitated by offices in central office, and you register, and your registration is approved by your child's counselor so that you could, let's say, retake a course if you wanted to improve a grade in honors geometry, for example. So those will take place. The schedule for that is throughout the summer. There's a session A and a session B. We can support you with questions at Wootton, but we do not directly oversee that program's implementation. We just provide information or offer support as needed. The one that I was asked to speak to this evening, this is what we call our local school program. So the local school program, these are non-credit options that schools generally offer to students, and we see them as enrichment opportunities. They're ways to either learn a specific skill, prepare a task, or to get ready for a course. And we used to have very broad latitude in order to offer pilot courses, but that has really been a changing landscape this year. MCPS has been a little bit more restrictive about what they are allowing schools to do. So ours are very focused in one area this year. And the courses that we have approved for the non-credit enrichment is an Algebra 1 prep opportunity for students. You would take that before you would then take algebra. And this one's particularly useful for the school for those students taking algebra for the first time, or if you're preparing to take it again, you're kind of nurturing the skills that you want to have a stronger start when you take algebra, for example. There's also a prep course for Algebra 2 and pre-calculus. So they are all math focused, and to repeat them again, it's Algebra 1 prep, pre-calculus, and Algebra 2 prep. Those are the 3 enrichment courses that we are offering this year. And there is no charge, and there is a schedule by which you would attend courses, generally in the morning. They're not all day, and they are in the month of July. 2 other things that just to make everybody aware, honors health. One to really share with everyone, there's a new requirement within the last year or 2 that students must take an health A and B in order to graduate. That's a big change. And there's also annually a high interest for students that want to take that during the summer, so that that frees up then another course that they want to take, and they can kind of fill that spot if they get health out of the way during the summer. So we, of course, have students that are interested in taking that. Our Honors B courses are offered for the first time this summer. And right now we have 4, possibly 5 sections of those moving forward. So we have a pretty sizable group of students interested in that. Again, we're at 4. We think we're probably going to get to 5. And historically at Wootton, we have offered what is called a Physical Science B, which is a prep course to go into the signature programs in the science pathways. So we also have that offering. And that is everything that we would be offering at Wootton this summer. And Brian, that would also conclude my
Okay, I just want to be
remarks today.
sure. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for those updates. And now we finish our PTSA business, and we'll move on to our main event for the night, which is our mental health forum. Shruti Japee is a senior associate scientist at the National Institute of Mental Health, where she conducts cognitive neuroscience research and how the human brain processes facial and body expressions. And she has 2 boys, one a junior at Wootton and another an 8th grader at Cabin John. And I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Shruti. So Shruti, over to you.
Thank you so much, Brian. And hello to everyone. I want to welcome all the parents who are on this call, eager to listen to our panelists, experts in mental health, especially adolescents. And I want to welcome the fantastic panel we have today. I want to thank Saab and Brian for putting together so many fantastic people together on the panel. So I'll take just a few moments first to introduce them to you, and then we'll jump right into questions that lots of parents are eager to hear your answers to. So welcome again. First, I'd like to introduce our first panelist, Dr. Azra Jagani. She is a board-certified pediatrician with more than 20 years of experience providing exquisite care to kids, starting from newborn care to well child visits to vaccinations and preventive health. In her own words, she enjoys watching her patients grow and develop and move towards adulthood. So she's got the right expertise for this crowd. Dr. Jagani currently works as a pediatrician at Abdow Friendship Pediatrics in Rockville. Welcome, Dr. Jagani.
Hi there. Good evening.
There you are. Fantastic.
Yes.
Great. Our next panelist is Dr. Haniya Raza. She's a board-certified child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist, and she is a chief of the Psychiatry Consultation Liaison Service at the National Institute of Mental Health in Bethesda. And I'm proud to say she's a colleague of mine at that institute. Her research interests and expertise are related to psychiatric disorders presenting in children, in adolescents, and of course, young adults. And she has a special focus also with developmental disabilities and complex medical illnesses. So welcome, Haniya. It's lovely to have you here. Also, I just want to note that all the panelists have really detailed bios that was sent out on the PTSA email. I just want to take just a few moments to highlight just some of their achievements here. The next panelist is Miss Katy Omerso. She is a licensed master social worker. She has a master's degree from Catholic University in Washington, D.C. She has a background in crisis intervention, trauma-informed care, inpatient and community services for children, teens, and adults. Ms. Omerso recently joined the Wootton community. She's part of the new Bridge to Wellness team at Wootton High School. She started in this role in September of 2020, and she has great insight into mental health needs of our high schoolers. So welcome, Ms. Omerso. Nice to have you here. There you are. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, and our fourth panelist is Dr. Elise Resnick. Dr. Resnick is a licensed graduate marriage and family therapist, LGMFT for short, and she has expertise in couples relationships, parenting, and mental wellness for children and adolescents. And since March of 2021, Dr. Resnick has been working as a mental health therapist with the organization called EverMind. And this is an organization that empowers children, teens, especially kids in Montgomery County, families and older adults to reach their optimal mental wellness. She's also an adjunct professor at the University of Maryland, Corliss Park, in the School of Public Health's Department of Family Science. Welcome, Dr. Resnick. I think I see you there. Perfect. Awesome. Okay. So if you're all ready, we'll jump right into questions. I think one of the ones that we've always started with for the past few years has been about the pandemic and its impact on our kids. And while the WHO and the CDC have declared a close to the pandemic after almost 3 years, the mental health effects amongst high school students continue to persist, as you know. For example, the CDC survey that was done about 1.5 years ago noted that nearly half of all high school students felt persistently sad or hopeless during the pandemic. And some of these effects, of course, linger on. So I wanted to open this up to all 4 panelists, and I want to hear from you what parents can do, how they can recognize the signs of this persistent sadness or hopelessness. That's we're all expected to come back to normal, but that's not going to happen overnight. So what can parents do to help teenagers kind of adopt, kind of reintegrate back and, hopefully reach a better state? So anybody want to take a stab at that? Get us started.
Okay, let me start. As a pediatrician, what I've been noticing is that a lot of my teenagers and adolescents who are coming back to the clinic, after 2 years, some of them didn't have physicals for 2 years, still seem to be, not out of it. They still feel that maybe there is still something going on. Nobody's wearing masks now, so they worry about that. They were not able to get in touch with their friends. So it's hard going back, where they were 2 years ago with their friends. And they've changed grades. Some were already middle schoolers who are now in high school. So things have changed for them. They did not go through the norms to go into high school. So definitely there's still a sense of frustration there amongst them. And I think what parents can do at this time is to reassure them that, things are coming back to normal, slowly but surely. But if they feel that their child is doing things which they were not doing before, they see that they are, sitting in their room more than usual, or they appear to be even sad or unhappy, then they have to talk to them about it. And I think reassurance and helping with, some counseling and all definitely would help them. I think Dr. Raza would be able to, give us some more advice on this.
Yeah, for sure. So, one thing I want to point out is that even prior to this most recent CDC report that has come out, we've been seeing a pattern of increasing mental health concerns among young people. And, as we even look at the reports from 2017, there's just been a drastic jump that has sort of happened over the last decade, even if we want to look at a decade, and even 2007, 2010, from that point on till where we find ourselves in 2017, there's a really big jump in the amounts of young people who are expressing that they're depressed, again, particularly girls, even in the previous data. And then, of course, the pandemic multiplies it even more, related to the things that Dr. Jagani was saying about, I think, isolation, fear, kids who worry about their parents who are having to go out and work, being away from their friends, missing out on different things. And so the signs of depression, I agree, are, what are the things parents should start looking for? So for me, it's persistence of different symptoms. So some, the obvious symptom is sadness in teens and adolescents. So a persistent a withdrawn look. They just are sad. They're kind of moping around. They're isolating. There's a lot of time in their room with the door shut, and it just kind of persists. Irritability is a classic symptom of depression in adolescents. So sometimes they don't really look sad. They just are irritable. They're edgy. They get frustrated and annoyed. Kids, I think at baseline, they can be irritable and frustrated and get mad about things and find their parents to be highly irritating. But if you see this persistence irritability and it's going across settings, you're seeing it. If you just see it at home, but at school, they're fine. And you're talking to the teachers at school and they're like, oh, no, they're fine. Their friends are fine. They're going out on the weekends. And the irritability is just at home, then that's a different thing. But I'm talking about an irritability that's sort of persistent across settings. And then they're frequently bored. That I find that to be a symptom where things that they once loved or things that they enjoyed doing before, they're just sort of pulling back from those things. So I would say those to me are the signs. And of course, the more serious signs where it's a no-brainer and what you're dealing with is that when kids are starting, because sometimes when it gets that bad and that bleak, kids start talking about, well, what's the point of this? They're not planning for their future. In more extreme cases, they're talking about wanting to die, wishing they would die. And then in even the more extreme, alarming cases, which the CDC report talked about, is rates of self-harm and just thoughts of wanting to take their lives. So those would be the more extreme, severe ones, which are going up among youth. And the DMV is definitely one of the regions in the country, interestingly, that's high on this concept of kids feeling suicidal or kids feeling like they want to hurt themselves. And in the extreme cases, kids attempting to hurt themselves, but very low on actual suicide, lower than other regions on actual suicide. So that's going into extremes. But then there are these other sort of more common signs of depression that you might see.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Raza. Dr. Resnick and Ms. Omerso, since you work with county kids specifically, I was wondering if you could, especially Wootton High School also, just wondering if you have any insights from being on the inside.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I think Dr. Raza did an amazing job of highlighting all the signs of depression. I also want to add signs of anxiety because, as Dr. Jagani said, I think there are a lot of kids that continue to be worried. I think that there's in Montgomery County, I think we do have a lot of kids under pressure, under academic pressure. So of course, there's some natural worry about grades, worry about social status, worry about sports, things like that. But if you do notice it in excess, right? If you do notice that kids are, very emotional about grades, even if they're not that bad, if they're very worried about conversations or health, or if you do notice that these worries are carrying over into many different areas, so across, school, home, in various areas, you're noticing that worry, I think that's the point to reach out as well. Anxiety and depression can sometimes go hand in hand. But I've definitely noticed a lot of anxiety since the pandemic. I do think that a lot more kids are concerned about, we did bring worry to the forefront, right? We did put that worry out there on purpose, right? We needed to protect kids. And then I think a lot of kids did latch onto that and look for some sense of control. So I think the anxiety is just as important to keep an eye out for. Depression and anxiety together, I'm seeing a lot of it. And I think when kids are under pressure anyways, it's easy to dismiss that as, oh, of course they're worried because they have AP exams. Of course they're worried because of grades. Of course they're worried because of college. But sometimes it's more than that. And I think we just need to, keep an eye on that as well.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, and something, and that's exactly what I was thinking along the lines of, is the anxiety is also quite intense. And as I tell my students often, sadly, anxiety and depression are really good friends, and they love hanging out together, and they just egg each other on, which makes it particularly difficult. I definitely see in the student population I see, which is actually at Einstein High School, mostly, I see a few middle schoolers as well, definitely self-harm. A lot of suicidal ideation, and the helplessness that was mentioned with Dr. Raza is that hopelessness is a big part of it. Another thing that a lot of students will say is the feeling of being like almost trapped, like they don't really see any way out of where they are and things ever getting into a positive space. So this feeling of being like contained or trapped, they'll often describe. And so that's where suicide will often come into their discussions as well. And I know that is, a higher level. Sorry, my dog was crying, so I had to pick up. A higher level of depression, but it is, and it could just be the students that are coming to us and that we're seeing. But it's definitely with the population I'm seeing at least significant. And the thing I hear with the college students that I work with, I still teach at the university as well, summer and winter, is a lot of frustration and anger about the loss of their like normalcy. So especially with students that I have who maybe didn't have their freshman or sophomore year of college, high school students who missed out, as was mentioned, on that transition point, kind of, and it leads them to almost feeling inadequate, like because they missed it, they don't know what to do. They're like, but I don't know how to do this. I don't know what this is like, because they didn't have the smooth transition. They just suddenly were in high school or suddenly were in college. And so kind of just being aware and sensitive to that as well, and building some confidence and how to talk to people. We just have to get back in there. And I think also that staying in the room a lot. I hear with a lot of my students, I'm just in my room with the door closed. And I do wonder if a lot of that came from that time that was normal. They were on Zoom all day long doing school, and it became normal and comfortable. And so kind of having to push themselves past what became their comfort zone is another thing that's a challenge that I'm seeing as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you all for really kind of highlighting the struggles that kids are facing. Dr. Resnick, you mentioned just now about the students who come to you and they are talking about what they're going through, which is great. So at least now they're talking, right? And oftentimes that is one of the biggest hurdles is, let's say I as a parent might notice something with my child, getting them or engaging them to start to talk about it, and then taking it to the next level, like seeking help from experts. So would you be able to give some advice, like practical advice to parents, in the sense that let's say my child is, there's a change in pattern in behavior, maybe sleeping a lot more, staying in the room a lot more, things like that. I will try to talk to the child, of course. But beyond that, maybe 1 or 2 steps down, how do we navigate that?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And it's interesting because a lot of the students that I see, and I don't know, Katie, if you have a similar experience, one of the neat things with Bridge to Wellness, because that's the same program, is that students can self-refer. And so when they're not wanting to talk to their parents or not comfortable talking to their parents, it is a space for them. So not to make your caseload jump out of control, Katie, but something for students to know is those resources are there for them in the high school, starting at 12 years old in the state of Maryland, students can self-refer without parental consent. So even those who aren't getting the support from parents, we're thinking in terms of the supportive parents, there are a lot who are not encouraging their children to seek mental health services. And in a lot of cases, there's a fear of judgment that I'm hearing from the students that I meet with. They're afraid of what their parents will say. They're afraid also with a lot of the students that I see, their parents have worked really hard to give them a very good life and a better life than they had. And so they're going to think something's wrong or that I'm ungrateful, or they're like, well, why isn't this good enough? So as a parent, being able to take a non-judgmental stance, being open and non-stigmatizing, I think is huge. Getting them to step towards mental health services for those who don't want to. I mean, we're seeing the ones who do. For those who don't feel comfortable, I would recommend normalizing it, recognizing, the vast numbers of adolescents, teens, children with mental health needs and concerns, and maybe even just pulling up, Psychology Today has all kinds of therapists, and maybe just popping through with them like, hey, is there anybody here that you would feel comfortable talking to, and getting a sense of what that might look like, and just kind of opening that door and those thoughts. Baby steps. I'm a big fan of baby steps when things are hard.
Yeah, that's good. Ms. Omerso, do you have advice for parents that would they come to you with how would they navigate that?
Yeah, absolutely. So our program, Bridge to Wellness, it is available for students to self-refer, which is great. They can come in and talk. And sometimes students come in and they meet with me one time and just kind of feel it out. I think it's nice that it is a service that's available in school because, I have students that stop by, they introduce themselves, they might grab a snack, they might just, see what it feels like to come in and see a therapist. That's not something that you can always do in an outpatient therapy setting. So it's nice that they can, I think my friend comes here, or they might just stop by with a friend and just say hi, or they might come in for one session, or just, we might do an intake, or they might say like, how would I go about doing this? I've had friends refer, somebody to come by, like, oh, my girlfriend said I need to come by here because I've really been struggling lately. I don't really know what that looks like, and we can have a conversation. I do usually encourage students to talk to their parents, or encourage them to allow me to make a phone call, because I do think parental involvement is important. And, I agree that not all parents are on board, and I understand that. And I think some students have hesitation about including their parents. But I think it's really important. I mean, I think the bottom line is most parents do love their children and want the best for them. So I do try to involve parents if possible, because I think it's great if we can work as a team, to better a child's mental health. So I do think it's important if we can get to that point. But I can take referrals from a student if they want to come walk by, if they just kind of want to check it out. And you just want to encourage them to, hey, just why don't you stop by and see what it's like? And if you don't like it, you don't have to keep going. So that's an option. I get phone calls from parents. My cell phone is my work cell phone. It's fine to text message, it's fine to call. I think the students like that comfort level of being able to text message. They can just send me a text and schedule something, or like, hey, do you have some time? I need to talk. So I think that's really great. Parents, I'm always open to parents giving me a call and just saying like, hey, I'd like to learn more about the program. Our program also has a youth development specialist, which offers like tutoring, mentoring, after school, lunchtime programs. They're always doing activities. And then we also have a care manager that's available for families that need a little bit extra support, maybe finding services. I know that Elise had mentioned like Psychology Today, and that's a great place to find someone. Our care manager is available to help families navigate that. If you need a psychiatrist, if you need a therapist, if you're looking for a new family doctor or a clinic, they can help you navigate that too. And if you don't have insurance, we are a free service. So it is accessible to anybody. Doesn't matter what kind of insurance you have. Some insurances have a high deductible, or if you're just having trouble finding someone that's a good fit for your family, it might be a good idea just to check it out. You know, or I mean, some people come just because it's like really difficult to try to get to therapy when you have school and after school activities and exams and things like that, and everybody's working and going in different directions. So just some ways that people access us, you know, email, school social worker, counselor, or stopping by my office. Any of those options are a great way to access services.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's very great practical advice. And it's lovely to hear about all the resources that are available. I do have a follow-up question from a parent, and it's along the lines of, what if the child doesn't want to talk to either a mental health counselor? And oftentimes what you might hear from them is, oh yeah, I'm fine, or I'll work it out myself, or, you know, they're teenagers, of course they're going to work this out. Like, so how far, so, I mean, when is it time to, like, first of all, when do you say, okay, we really have to go see somebody? And then two, how do you actually practically make that happen? We can't necessarily drag them, but are there any tips that you would give us, basically?
Yeah, I'd like to, oh, go ahead.
I was thinking about this as everyone was talking, and just thinking about, you know, even when my own kids are just like a wall of silence and you can't break it. So it's hard. I mean, kids are really, really hard. And, you know, they pick up on our anxiety, and they pick up when we are appearing or acting afraid of them. So it's really important to really self-reflect, I think, as a parent, and just, you know, tell yourself, okay, I got this. I'm the parent, I have raised this child, and I can still remain in control of this situation, you know, without overly controlling the child. I think, you know, you want to look at the way how does your household respond to problems in general? You know, how do you model talking about stuff in front of your kids? And if you model that, and they continuously see that we are a unit, we're a family system, whatever the family system is, and we talk about stuff. So you can come home and say, you know, I had this really hard time. You know, you just model it. You talk about stuff, and you try to share your experience with other members of the family, and you just become a family that communicates. I think having, if at all possible, I think I said this last year, I probably did because I say it all the time, is the family as a unit, where you guys see yourself as a unit, and you devote it, even if it's one day a week where there's like everyone eats together, whether that's like Saturday morning breakfast or Thursday night dinner. If you can do dinner together every night, that's fantastic. But to have time together as a family, I know it can sound a little corny, but it's important. It's important to have your identity as, we're a family of 5, or we're a family of 2, or we're a family of, you know, whatever. And this is our unit, and we communicate and we rely on each other. Now, you know, practically, if a kid is just like a wall and they don't want to talk, I think you shouldn't give up. You should, you know, you can, you know, just really harmless statements, say it once or twice. And if they're a wall, just, you can back off, but keep saying it. Keep giving them the message of, you know, I've noticed it seems like things are really hard for you lately. Do you want to talk about anything? I'm here if you want to talk. No, I don't want to talk with you. I'm fine. And just say, okay, but just to know that I'm here. If you change your mind, or if tomorrow maybe you want to talk about it, or later, you can always come to me. And so you just keep giving them this steady, reassuring message that I am here, and whatever it is, I can handle it. The other thing when communicating with kids is, or anybody for that matter, is we have this immediate instinct to start going into problem solving mode. And so, you know, I see Elise and Katy smiling, because I guess, I mean, we know this as people who do therapy. You know, what we do in the room when the kid comes into our session, you just listen and you don't try to fix it. You do not give them advice. You don't ask them why they feel that way. You just accept that they are very bothered by this. This is a really important issue for them, and you just listen. You don't pass judgment on it. And sometimes it's just that active, intentional, I'm just here to listen and hear about it, goes a very long way, because then they can't get defensive and they can't feel, you know, this this idea of being validated. I'm sure we've all heard it. This term is used very freely nowadays about people needing to be validated. And the idea is just to be heard and say to them, you know, it sounds difficult. Tell me more. Tell me more of, you know, well, why do you think she said that to you? And instead of, well, I don't know why you feel that way. You know, she's probably just whatever. And you immediately go into fix it mode, or you immediately go into the mode of, you shouldn't feel the way you feel. So it's just being a little bit more thoughtful and active listening. You can try it with your friends, you can try it with other people, and then, you know, practice it. And then it gets easier when you have these kinds of moments with your kids. Those are maybe some practical kinds of advice.
Great. That's really, really, really useful. Dr. Jagani, did you want to add something?
Yeah, sure. You know, when they come to me and we need to get talking, especially when we are doing their physicals and doing the heads, you know, discussion with them, going over things that they're going through in school, they do sometimes, they won't look at you, won't make eye contact. And, you know, so you try. And at that time, what I usually do is I send the parent out and I sit down one-on-one with the child to see if they can open up to me. And then, you know, offer them different kind of options, whether, you know, you want to talk to me, would you like to talk to, as Haniya said, go to a therapist and listen to them. As I said, just listen to them and say, you know, things will be okay and we will try and help out. So I think talking to them one-on-one, especially the teenagers, and sending their parents out, sometimes they do tend to open up, and especially if they've been with you for a while, you know, that we get that rapport with your physician. They do. And that's when sometimes they are willing to go ahead and seek some help. But times like when, you know, you get an idea that there's some self-harming behavior turning up or extremism is coming in, then, you know, you really have to, you know, coax them and get things to moving, you know, to get them to get some help. But, you know, talking to them one-on-one sometimes has helped me a lot, you know, and they do try to tell you what they would like and who they would like to talk to. So I think getting their confidence and being their friend with them, you know, that goes a long way. The communication lines have to be open with them. You know, let them talk and we listen to what they say.
Okay.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's great. So collectively, I've heard normalizing mental health issues as a family, like being able to talk to each other or even to mention any struggles that you yourself as a parent might be going through. And then this idea of active listening, which can, like you said, can go a long way. When somebody feels heard, it often has, I'm not saying it's going to solve the problem, but it's a place to start. So thank you. Thank you for that very practical advice. I want to turn to something that Dr. Raza, you mentioned earlier, which is the trend in that CDC survey about female students being more likely to make suicide plans or having suicide ideation or self-harm. Would you be able to comment on what some underlying reasons for this might be? I mean, I think we all might have some idea, but it would be nice to hear from a professional standpoint what that might be. And also, I guess I'll throw in there, maybe also providing some other tips for parents on how you can identify signs of suicidal ideation, because you're not always going to know. So I'll throw that to you, Dr. Raza, to get us started.
Yeah, it's a hard question. And we kind of go over this over and over. What is it about, girls and mental health and the suicidal thoughts? And so, it's to some extent it's largely unknown, and I wouldn't necessarily be reassured by the data on the boys, because what we know about men and women there is evidence to suggest that across the board, across medical studies, mental health studies, women report more. They talk about their symptoms more. They're more likely to say yes to things in a survey and answer very openly and just communicate things. And so their numbers are always higher than men. And so I wouldn't rush to say that the boys in the US, the teen boys, are faring better than the girls. I would say, I would question it and say, I hope so. However, what if they're just not reporting and they're just saying no because perhaps our society has sort of these gender roles about it's okay for women and girls to talk about mood and anxiety and distress, but for boys it's not. And so I think as our society is changing for the better, I think, in the sense where we are even questioning what is gender binary, is gender something else. I think as a society, we're becoming more open to these ideas. And so I would hope that in time, the men and boys report more distress and even symptoms, even chest pain and abdominal pain and trouble breathing.
Right.
Sometimes the rates look higher in women simply because they're willing to talk about it and the men don't report it. And that is an evidence-based thing. Now, again, if this now moves into boys and girls, that part, I don't know if it's evidence-based, so I don't want to misspeak. So there's that. There's this idea of, let's not get too comfortable with the boys are doing better than the girls. They might be, but we don't know that for a fact. I think, there's this whole idea, and I know you're going to go into social media, that's coming.
Yeah.
But, there's this idea of, not all girls are on social media, but many, many, many kids are on social media. There's a lot of pressures, I think, and I do think it goes across to boys and girls, but if we talk about the girls, physical appearances, who your friends are, how smart you are you going to the parties, and all of this stuff. And I think the pandemic, with kids feeling super lonely, being isolated, and then coming back into school 2 years later, like mentally they might be in 8th grade still because they didn't have a lot of that social development happening. Maybe they learned some stuff online or with their friends as through texting and whatever, but they're coming in kind of with some residual 8th grade developmental level. But now you're telling them, well, now you're a sophomore and there's this whole class of freshmen behind you and you're actually a sophomore. And next year you're going to be a junior, and they're just kind of like, it's this overload, I think, that kids are experiencing. So there's that pandemic piece, but I think it's something to listen to. We do, I think many people, if you follow the news and the media, there's this whole thing about Instagram and girls and how there are high rates of girls on social media. They have higher rates of becoming depressed and anxious. And having low self-worth as they size themselves up against other people. Not to say that all social media is bad. Social media has a lot of wonderful aspects of it. And I think some kids actually love social media and they find it a very pleasant place and they don't experience a lot of negative things. But then there are those kids who do, and we have to be really mindful, I think, of that and be aware of what is your child's experience when they're on social media. What does that feel like? It's very subtle. There's a lot of bullying. There's a lot of stuff that happens. That's hard to get at because it's a very personal experience with them and their phone. Right. And it's hard to get in there, know exactly what's happening. And sometimes they can come out in a terrible mood and you'll have no idea because something just happened online and it's hard to dig in and figure it out.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Any of you, the rest of you would like to throw in anything about that?
I think just kind of on the heels of what Dr. Raza was saying, there's a quote that I'm often using with my students. Comparison is the death of joy. Supposedly it's Mark Twain, but if that's true, and I do believe it very possibly is, imagine being on social media and you're comparing, and a lot of people say with social media, you're comparing everybody's highlights reel to your truth, which is all the outtakes. The outtakes aren't making it to social media. So you're seeing everybody at their best, not even fully real, filtered, and you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot live up to this. I cannot compare. I will never be good enough. So what I hear And mostly I do work with female students, so I don't know the gender differences specifically, but I see a lot of internalized like self-hate, lack of self-esteem. Again, that hopelessness, like I will never be that beautiful, or I will never be, my house will never look like that, you know, so that comparison, if that's the death of joy, imagine where our rates of depression are raising, you know, that makes a lot of sense. And of course, that's not the only thing, but there's a lot of logic to that. And I hate banging on social media and technology because I'm a huge fan. In a lot of ways, there is a lot of positive, and there was a need for that connection during the pandemic. But there's also a lot that is really harmful. And I do have quite a few students who have been cyberbullied as well. And that has been literally traumatic for them, to the point that they don't want to even go to school. So there's a lot of that. And again, maybe it's just that I see the females. I don't hear of it happening with the males as often. And the why is a question mark. That said, that is something that I think is at play as well.
Okay.
I do think also, just to, you know, thinking about brain development, I mean, so I would venture to say that a lot of parents, a lot of us also are on social media because we also use it to connect with people, to see what's going on, to read the news, to go shopping, to do different things. But we're adults and we have adult brains. And so you're looking at these kids who have the exact same access to that unending world of information, and they're looking at the same things in some fashion that we are with our adult brain, and they're looking at it with their sort of evolving, developing adolescent brain. And you think about the mismatch that's there, that, you know, I think adults, we have a little bit more, our executive functions are different. I mean, you know, sometimes we have the ability to say, you know what, I've been doing this now for 90 minutes, I need to stop. And we put it down. And some of us may let it go into 5 hours, but we have the wherewithal as adults with adult brains and experience and responsibilities that we can recognize, okay, this is going down a bottomless hole and I just need to put this down and stop and now go do the other 10 things that I have to do. And kids are probably less likely, they're impulsive, they get sucked in and they go in that bottomless scroll of TikTok, and it literally is never ending. And then we have these, you know, the social media companies and the alerts are deliberately getting more and more complicated to turn off, so that their phone is constantly buzzing and giving them alerts and things that they have to tend to. So it's just to be aware of that too, that they're looking at a lot of the same things you are, but without that brain wherewithal, that brain capability that we as adults have, being,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
So
no, I totally,
that
I would second that.
it's
Absolutely.
tricky, and they're getting exposed to content that they certainly developmentally, emotionally, at some level, it's too much for them. And
Agreed.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
and so you have 14, 15-year-old girls wanting to look like, you know, 25-year-old celebrities. And so that's tricky. It's
Yeah.
you just have to be aware and see it for what it is. And
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. Any other bits of advice there or information?
I was just going to add one thing. Just the difference between boys and girls that I'm seeing in my office personally is that I think girls and social media, they do talk more. They're more social. So I think, again, it's that high level of reporting. So I do see more girls. I do have more girls in my office. But when I do see boys, it's often a more critical case. We're already at crisis. We're already much further along in the mental illness. We're much further along without seeking help. So we're often already at like, okay, we need to contact your parents. We need to get the crisis center. We need to get to the hospital. It's something much more serious. And I do think that boys tend to cover things up a lot more for a lot longer period of time. I see just as much eating disorder, high level of anxiety comparison with boys. So don't think that they're immune to it. They still have it. It's still there. They're still on social media, but I don't think we see as much bullying because the social aspect is not quite as prevalent. But absolutely, it's still there. And I still see eating disorders, self-harm, I see all of that with boys too, but they often hide it much better.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, I want to talk just a little bit more and maybe go further down that the extreme cases just for a second, and maybe help us understand when a child is having suicidal thoughts, what are the signs that, I mean, there are thoughts and potentially there may be self-harm, which may be more evident to the parents. Is there anything that parents should be watching out for? I mean, it likely comes with the other things you talked about earlier, Dr. Raza, which is like being more withdrawn, being sad, not doing the things that bring them joy. But are there any other things that parents should be watching out for?
With a teen that is self-harming or saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
self-harming or voicing or having thoughts about suicide
Yeah.
or self-harm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Specifically, yeah.
one thing I think that people in mental health, you don't necessarily weirdly equate self-harm with suicidal ideation. In some kids, those are two different things, and they are self-harming actually as a very maladaptive coping skill. So they're doing it to feel better. They're not doing it because they want to die or kill themselves. They're doing it because they feel awful, and this is something that somehow they have come across as, this will make me feel better, and I get some kind of a relief, or I get some kind of a the pain that I experience distracts me from the other thing, which is far more difficult for me to manage. And so the problem with it, where the kids will argue with you, but I'm not suicidal per se, I'm just, is that it's a dangerous behavior. It's very maladaptive, and there's a million other ways to cope with bad feelings that don't involve, harming your body with objects or, all these kinds of things. So it's tough. I would definitely, and I'm sure Dr. Jagani has been called about these kinds of things, but definitely, the first place is you definitely want to talk to your child about it. If there's a trusted person at school, if there's a trusted pediatrician, to start talking about it. And, the first conversation you have with your child about it is, explain to me what this is, and how did this happen, and explain to me, what happened here, and just to have, again, a non-judgmental conversation about it to see what is it that they're doing. Now, of course, if they're saying, I was trying to kill myself last night and then I changed myself, it's completely different. They're saying to you that they tried to do that. And in that case, I do think they need to go to a professional and talk about it and just make sure it's not a persistent feeling. Kids can be very impulsive, and they can experience a huge burst of emotions, and in that moment feel like they do want to end their life. What's the point? I want to die, this, that, the other. I want to kill myself. I don't want to do this anymore. So one thing with it is to be able to contain that impulsivity, if, for lack of a better word, I know it's not a popular word, but when kids get into this hysterical mode, I think parents might know what I'm talking about, where they just lose it. They're crying, they can't breathe, and they're just, so the job of the parent there is to maintain your own anxiety and your cool, and try to contain the situation. I might have said this last year too, but it's an analogy that I use where the child is very out of control. And so you want to, at that moment, serve as sort of a container, a hard, solid container that can contain all of their anxiety and impulsivity, and that, again, lack of a better word, hysterical response that they're having. And to communicate to them somehow that this is, you're just having a wave of emotion right now. This is going to pass. This is not permanent. We're in the middle of something right now. What can we do to get you calmer? Sometimes, we have these techniques that are very commonly used in what we call DBT therapy, but it's basically grounding and being able to tolerate distress, distraction. These are sort of the themes of this kind of therapy. And so sometimes it's putting on a favorite song of the moment and just listening to the song. For some kids, it's exercising, it's go and take a shower and then come back out and let's just talk this through and let's figure it out. So in the moment, those kinds of distraction activities are good. Do you want to go sit outside? Do you want to go sit in the backyard? Do you want me to come with you for a walk? And to really share with them that this is probably a feeling that's going to pass. You're in the throes of it right now, but let's just give it some time and let's see if it passes. Let's see what happens. And I'm here, and I'm here to take care of you. So these kinds of things I think can be quite helpful in the moment, but you definitely want to give a call to the to your pediatrician. If you have a psychiatrist or therapist, obviously, I don't think it hurts to call the school. I'm sure the school, it would be important to have the school know this, that this kind of a reaction happened. So I hope this is helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No,
What would
that's
you
really
do in
good.
the throes of something like that?
No, that's really good practical advice. Something that we can actually tuck away and put into a toolbox for use later.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any Dr. Jagani, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, as the doctor, as Haniya was saying, we do get these calls, and usually these calls are from, I see them more in female patients. I think they're more vocal about it. And it's usually after hours that we get such calls coming in. Something happened at school and that pushed them over the edge. And I think at that time, main thing is, yes, trying to calm them down, distract them, but you have to be very vigilant with them also. Because things, they just do certain things. I mean, I've heard them calling me and telling me that they are ready to, do a lot of things. So we have to calm them. I keep talking to them on the line, and then of course try to talk to the parents, and definitely try to get help. Try calling the crisis line for them and see what can be done. But be around, to have somebody be there with them, and keep talking to them to try to see if you can diffuse the situation, as Dr. Raza said, distract them with things. But sometimes it's a little difficult, when you start talking to them. They are, as she said, the parents are hysterical, the patient is hysterical. And so, we have to take it very seriously. And I've had to send, a couple of them to the hospital, and of course, gotten help for them right away. But, and then after that also, you have to wait, because sometimes you get a rebound, a couple of days down the road, again, without telling anybody too much. They're up to something. I see, when I'm checking, when do the physicals, I always make them, they come in these baggy, hoodies and sweaters, always, roll up their sleeves, because you'll always find marks of cutting over there, a lot of them. And they won't tell you these. You have to be looking at them all the time, so the subtle signs which you have to be aware about. And, and recently I've seen a lot happening with girls. I don't know whether it's now going to a prom is coming up, and things are happening, so they're getting a little hysterical about these things also. As you said, looking the best, being the best, being in the cool lot. So those things are also affecting them a lot, and of course social media is always there, so I think that's what we are really worried about now.
I just wanted to highlight something. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Katy.
I just wanted to add, as far as talking to your kids about suicidal thoughts, if you are concerned that your child is suicidal, please be direct. Keep those channels open, but also directly ask them, are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you thinking about hurting yourself? It's very scary to put it out there, but you need to be very direct, because you want a direct answer and you want them to feel comfortable talking about it to you. And the only way to really put that out there is to say the words. So please be very direct, say what you're thinking. Are you worried, that they're going to kill themselves? Are you worried that they're going to hurt themselves? You need to say those words out loud and just be very direct with them.
As opposed to the passive stance where you're saying, do you want to do anything bad? Are you thinking bad thoughts? Do you want to harm yourself? I agree totally. I've had parents get really mad at me in session when I've directly asked kids that, but you have to use the words, and then they'll tell you. They'll tell you yes or no, so it's very good to be clear and direct. Agree totally.
Yeah, there's a fear often that we're planting the idea. It's not news to them that exists, so it's not planting any ideas. I also wanted to just highlight something Dr. Jagani said. The 988 is a wonderful thing for kids to know about, even if you don't have fears about your kids right now. You know, anybody on here with younger kids, even just having it be, you know, as known as 911. It's not only for suicide. You can call if you just need someone to talk to. We were talking about kids not wanting to talk to their parents or not being ready to go to a therapist. It's a non-judgmental, supportive listener who always validates. So that's a wonderful resource to make sure that all kids are aware of and have access to as much as possible. Also, I think part of the question had been, what are some other signs above and beyond the signs of depression? So ones that are important, you know, just talking about death, you know, being very dark in that way, talking about death, talking about wanting to die. I mean, some kids are pretty direct about it, and parents don't realize that they're giving you a direct message. But also giving things away, giving away possessions is another one to keep an eye on. That some kids will start to give away things that are important to them because they don't plan on living. In some cases, someone who had been really down will sometimes suddenly be more joyful and bright, and it's because they've already decided to die. So if there's a sudden change in that way, I know it's weird to like be mindful of that, but it's something to just be aware of, like, why is suddenly my kid happy out of nowhere? Especially if you've already had concerns about suicide. Those are things to think about. Also, Montgomery County does have the crisis center. I know therapists tend to throw around like, go to the crisis center. And then if you're a parent, you're like, what is that? So there is a Montgomery Crisis Center where you can take students, children who are presenting as suicidal. Even if you just have general concerns, you can take them to the crisis center for assessment, and they will help from there. I've sent several students to the crisis center. And actually there are times that they don't, sometimes they've ended up being hospitalized, sometimes they haven't, but it's open up conversation, even having that moment with their parent and the parent realizing like, oh, I did not understand that things were at this point, or I wasn't taking it seriously. And I've had students who now have really had improved relationships with their parents, even though they hit that really low point, that really tough point, you know, again, that wave, they get past it and things actually often do get better from there. So it's something, it's scary in the moment. And I always validate that, but it's a great resource that the county has as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, that was very, very useful. Again, very practical advice, which is great, that parents can use. I want to switch gears just a tiny bit and ask a question that came in through the chat to me about, so among many stressors that the kids face, some are actually dealing with, you know, figuring out their gender identity, exploring their gender, you know, there's, and Dr. Raza, you mentioned earlier that although things are getting better, there's still stigma, right? And so kids are dealing with that, dealing with their own feelings, trying to figure out who they are. So specifically, with respect to exploring gender, what have you seen? What kind of advice do you have for parents who are watching their kids go through this? Are there any specific things that parents can do to support them?
Yeah. And this is a hard one, because I think a lot of the parents that I work with have a lot of emotions about it themselves. And, you know, I'm just thinking of I've had so many conversations with parents about this. And, you know, one of the things is that the parent says that, I don't know whether to believe this, because this kid has been, you know, there's been no confusion about gender this entire time. And now at age 15, all of a sudden they're saying this. And so there's this, I think there's this, there's just a lot of anxiety and confusion, rightfully so, among parents, because you're trying to navigate the situation, which never has come up before. In certain cases, it has come up before, but it's generally a tricky situation. I think one of the things that's important to know, you know, you just think about kids, you know, just to really need to feel understood. And if they're misunderstood, it can be a very lonely and insecure feeling when your own parent doesn't understand you. And so the message we should be giving to them is, you know, of course you speak openly and honestly with them, and you can say, you know, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around this, but you know, I want you to know that I'm here. I support you. Let's talk about this. And you just meet them where they are. What I've seen with a lot of kids is that it is hard for them to even explore this idea, that they become unclear about what their gender identity is. And then when you wrap in the sexuality, which is a completely different construct and concept, it becomes even more confusing for them. And so they're already in a really big struggle. And so, you know, you just have to support them, and you have to kind of see where they are. And then you also have to be willing to be there with them when it evolves, because it often evolves. Like, you know, I had this one patient who's biologically a female who, you know, I think probably was 14 and started saying things, 14 or 15, and saying things like, well, I'm pansexual. And then got really mad when her parents didn't know what that meant, and felt like, oh, you're not validating me. And this is what, you know, so then the parents look it up and okay, that's what you are. And then that turned into, so it started with pansexual, then it turned into, well, no, actually, I think I'm a lesbian. Well, then it turned into, well, I think I'm non-binary. And then she had this big struggle because this person started confusing then gender and sexuality. And so that's just to give an example of that this is very confusing for the kid, and it's morphing and it might be evolving. And so just being there with them and not judging that confusion that they're having, because they themselves might not know something is not feeling right. And they may land at different things and identify as different things, and it kind of just morphs. I do have to say, I've had a lot of parents come and tell me that they've been very sort of disheartened, because I don't know if this is true, maybe Katy, you can answer it, but this idea that if this happens, they're allowed to discuss it at school, but the school doesn't necessarily have to tell the parent. And I've had a lot of parents come to me and they find out 8 months later that their kid has been, you know, called a completely different name and has identified in a completely different way at school, but not at home. And so this creates a lot of, I don't necessarily agree with this idea. I know MCPS may have arrived at it, and I don't know if it's exactly true. I might be distorting it a bit, but this idea of where parents are left out of it and everything's happening at school, and then the parents are not discussed. I know, Katy, you said that you are the first to recommend, well, let's give your parents a call and talk, but it's this balance of, we want parents to be open and accepting and being there for their kid as they go through this process, but yet parents are feeling sometimes like they're not being involved. So I don't know what the solution to that is. That's out of my scope, but just some thoughts I had about it.
I can't say for sure what the school policy is. I do always try to involve parents, and my reasoning for that is it's not going to go away, right? This isn't something that's going to go away. I think it's something that eventually will come out. This is something that we're going to have to eventually face. So even if it's not right now, you know, I think eventually we do have to talk about it. Maybe I just help them through that conversation. I'm never outing kids to their parents, but I do think that it is important for parents to know that the suicide rates drop drastically when we affirm children's gender. So it's very important to affirm that, even if you think that might change, even if you think they are just exploring, even if you think that's not true. You can affirm, and you can still allow room for exploration. You can still allow room for all of those things that you think are true. You can even express the fact, I'm not sure about this. I don't know how I feel about this. I'm nervous. I'm scared, but I'm here for you and I love you, right? And I will respect what it is that you'd like to be called. So I do try to help parents navigate that conversation. And I think by, you know, myself as a professional affirming gender, then I think that helps parents do that. I think it opens the door for parents. And I think that tries to, you know, I try to bridge that gap some, but I can't speak for the school as a whole, but that's
Sure,
where I come from as a therapist. Yeah.
I'm happy to jump in and just give a little speak to like what we do at school. So we're in a sense of the child, right? And I just want to know, like, as the professionals are going to work with whatever situation is, our goal is to loop everybody in. That's in the best interest for the school, the child, and everybody involved. There are specific guidelines that we follow that if it's not a best interest move based on what the student is telling us, it might not be an immediate thing that we do. But I just kind of want to say clearly there's no set guideline in which the school has told you will not work with parents or that information will not be given out. we have to center the student in what we're doing. And my experience has been there are some situations with right here, right now, that's not a best interest move to immediately pick up the phone call and make a call home. But it is, of course, looked at each time, and we want to make a decision that involves everyone to the extent that we can. And there are guidelines that we do follow with MCPS.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Nelson, for adding that. That was perfect.
Yeah, that's helpful. Mhm.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
would say,
yeah.
I would say that, you know, if we think about broader interventions, is, you know, along the same lines, I do think that it is really important for the school to be an inclusive community. And so that's also really important because school is so important. That's where the kids are spending half of their time. That's where they get the positive feedback from their peers. And so, you know, these ideas of how do we make our schools a more welcome and inclusive place for anybody? You know, if you know, and this goes beyond the LGBT QIA community. I think it even for you know, kids of color, kids of different socioeconomic statuses, kids of you know, different you know, I've done a lot of work with kids on the autism spectrum when I was at Children's, and so just sort of like where our school culture is to be welcoming and accepting of everybody, I think goes a long way. And in those health classes where I know these kids, they love taking health in the summer and quote unquote getting it out of the way, but that's a great forum for a full semester long, you know, where you can have a lot of content and you have, I think, a little more leeway to have that kind of content in there. So,
Yeah. Dr. Raza, you bring up, you talked about your work with autism spectrum disorder. And actually, I just had a question about that, more kind of asking if there is anything different or specific that parents of children on the spectrum should be aware of that's, of course, different from neurotypical peers in the sense of red flags of concern in terms of mental health specifically. Do you see a higher incidence? Does it manifest differently?
yeah, I think it does. I think with kids on the spectrum, they have these inherent brain-based differences. So it's very neurological, very brain-based, where social cognition, this idea of social know-how, understanding the nuances of things, understanding perhaps subtleties of language, figures of speech, nonverbal communication. These kids inherently at a brain level, it is very hard for them to do that. So they go through the world not necessarily understanding all of the nuances of things, including the nuances of language. The English language has so many different words. The word bow, for example, it can mean something on a tree. It can mean bowing down as a verb. It could mean a bow that you put in your hair. So the English language itself is really hard. And so these kids definitely have that added struggle where they're constantly scanning their environment. I'm talking about the more higher functioning ones that are aware of this. And so they realize that life is just harder for them because they're scanning and they're trying to figure things out. They definitely, I think kids on the spectrum, like any other kid, they do at some level they want to belong, they want to have friendships. They might value those friendships a little bit differently. They don't want to be bullied. They don't want to be mistreated. And I think kids, they tend to also have, in addition to problems with social cognition, they have problems with cognitive rigidity. And so these kids tend to be very prone to getting stuck, wanting to do things a certain way, seeing things as either this way or that way. Their brains tend not to be flexible and flowing the way perhaps a same age kid can, and just be more flexible and shift sets and accept things that weren't that are unexpected. And so these kids, I would say, because of these two inherent features in their brains that make life more difficult for them, they could be definitely more at risk of being bullied, of therefore then having a sense of not being understood, and even not being understood by their own family, not being understood by teachers. A lot of people don't get kids with autism, particularly the high functioning. I feel like the lower functioning kids who are less verbal, who may have intellectual disabilities, those are easier to understand because they wear their disability a little bit more obviously than perhaps a higher functioning kid who has an average IQ and who knows how to talk. we have really high expectations for these kids and we might miss it, particularly girls. Girls with autism get missed a lot, the higher functioning girls. And so these kids can walk around feeling very misunderstood. And then that can then open the doorway to feeling depressed and anxious, I think.
So in,
Yeah, so
yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I was just wondering if there's the manifestation. So let's say a depressed child who might be high functioning on the spectrum, are the manifestations similar? So are the warning signs of, you know,
Yeah.
withdrawal or
I think
getting
it's very
bored?
similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
not wanting to do the things they usually want to do, more irritable, more withdrawn.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, I have a request in the chat that after this meeting, if we could post a list of all the potential services and helplines that you all have talked about. So Ms. Omerso, if you don't mind, I'll reach out to you afterwards and then we could put something together and send it out on the PTSA list, if that's okay. Okay, great. So I have a couple of questions that I feel like we need to talk a little bit upbeat, just to get lighten the mood a little bit. I know it's graduation season and our seniors will be off to college in a few months. And I know some on the panel have such children who will be off to college. And, you know, as teenagers and parents prepare for this kind of big step, and we hope as parents that we've prepared them, but there's definitely anxieties on both ends, parents as well as kids. What can we do as parents to kind of bolster them and get them ready to leave the comfort of this known world, the world that they've spent 18 years in, and then kind of, you know, provide the tools of like make new friends and how they can face this new unknown. Hopefully those skills have been acquired over the past 18 years and they're ready to be out the door and be successful. But are there any tips that you would like to share with parents in the next few months that they could, you know, help with the transition? Any takers on this one?
What
Dr.
I
Jagani?
don't
Yeah.
talk to the parents is that, you know, try to get to know who all, if there are any of your friends who are going to be going to the same school as they're going, and try to get to meet them or get to know who is going to be in the dorm with them and how they're going to set up things. So before they just have to go and step in and, you know, get surprised that who's my, you know, going to be my roommate, who's in the dorm. Or so if they can, you know, get to know, especially when they go to see the schools and all, and when they're getting a, you know, a tour and all, if they know who are their friends who are going to be there, sometimes knowing a couple of school students from your own school or your own batch helps allay the anxiety a little bit. So, you know, they have friends there, and then, you know, talk to them, talk to those parents, make a little, you know, chat group, so that, you know, let's go together. So that kind of, I've seen that that's made them very comfortable and they look forward to going over there. So, you know, talking up and then, you know, deciding things together, that we are going to take our things, what are we going to take, what things we need. So, you know, just I think talking and communicating and trying to get to know who's there, I think that has helped a lot. So, you know, I think that allays the anxiety a little bit.
That's great. So starting to build that network that they're
right, exactly, absolutely, yes.
Okay, that's great. Any other tips? Dr. Raza, you want to share anything that you might be doing this summer? Oh, sorry, Dr. Resnick.
That's okay. Well, just, you know, teaching college students and seeing some of the struggles that they face, I think, and it's very different what the student experience now from when I was in college a long time ago. There seems to be a lot of like still connection with parents, like texting back and forth, like all day long. I would ask my students, like, how often do you, so I teach course on family also, how often do you communicate with their parents? So they're like, oh, my mom just texted me. Like, I'm like, I would talk to my parents once a day, which my roommate thought was ridiculous because you had to pay long distance, you know, so it's very different. So I think there is a piece of giving them that space to build resilience, and to, you know, it's important to be there for them, of course, but to also help them know that they can do this. and that it's not going to be perfect always. And that's okay. There are going to be tough days. There are going to be days that your roommate is just going to drive you crazy. Or you're going to just wish that you had picked a different school because things are just so hard, and letting them be prepared for that. Because I think we, often just want our kids to have perfection and want them to be excited and be looking forward to this opportunity, but setting realistic expectations, where what I see with the students that I teach is sometimes things get rough and they just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
They just stop. They'll say, like, I haven't done any assignments because I got too anxious about doing assignments because I missed one assignment and now I'm going to fail your class. And so knowing that, like, it's okay you missed one assignment, talk to me about it. So I'm always encouraging the students I meet with now, talk to your professors, be communicative. That's a huge one too. Like, if you start falling behind, be honest about it. Don't make up excuses, explain what's going on. There's a lot of sensitivity to mental health issues on campus now. So always being okay as much as possible, letting your professors know, reaching out, open, honest, but also, just building resiliency and building realistic expectations as parents, I think, is important too. And helping kids know that you trust in them, that they can get through tough times.
Yeah. That's good. Ms. Omerso, are you seeing kids come to you as they start to face this transition that's coming up over the summer, the seniors?
I am, yes, and a lot of those same concerns about how they'll manage the workload and how hard it's going to be. So I just try to offer a lot of reassuring words, as I'm sure parents are, and I think being prepared for that, knowing where to turn. I talk to kids a lot about the transition for their mental health. So I talk about, if they've been coming to see me and then they're transitioning to a campus, I try to let them know that there's probably someone on campus that is there that can support their mental health. How can you reach out? How can you utilize insurance? How can you find providers? So I want them to know there's somewhere to go after this. And I think that's probably an important conversation for parents to have as well. If things do get hard, where can they turn? Maybe that's assignments, maybe that's mental health, maybe that's social anxieties, maybe that has something to do with just being away from home. But I think it's really important that they have somewhere to turn for those concerns, because once they're out on their own, they really just need to know where to go for help. And maybe they don't want to be texting mom every moment, or maybe they feel like they can, but making sure that they have some kind of support when they make that transition.
Okay. Yeah. That's fantastic. So I guess collectively, what I'm hearing you say, and I'll use this next year when I have my own senior going off to college, which will be build a network early so that they have the support network when they're on campus. Urge them to be communicative. So talk to their professors and kind of build those relationships as well so that they can manage stressors in that way. And then what you mentioned is proactively look for information, gather information about where they can turn to if there is a problem on campus. Okay, fantastic. Awesome. We're getting to about 8:30, and I had I wanted to finish with one topic and kind of looking ahead. But before I do that, I want to just ask if there are any more questions from the audience. If you want to either put it in the chat, or if you feel comfortable, you can unmute and ask the question yourself. So please do that in the next minute or two for our panelists. And Dr. Raza and Ms. Omerso, thank you for those details in the chat, the information about the County Crisis Center. There's a phone number there, and also the 988 Lifeline. And we'll send this out on the PTSA email blast as well. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So I would like to kind of ask each of you to take a minute and talk about some of the major challenges that you see that may be coming up over the next year. And then close with maybe something positive about what you're hopeful for the future in terms of teen mental health in general. I know it's kind of broad, but each of you practice in very specific ways, and you are in touch with the kids on a daily basis. So I just wanted to hear, who knows, we might be here again next year discussing similar issues, but I want to hear from you about challenges that you think may be coming up and what you hope for the future, in the near future.
Let me start and say, I think some of the challenges which I feel we are facing now and we will be facing is whatever social media has to offer. Because we think so much going on. This, and as someone said, that comparison, and I agree with them, that comparison is really taking a toll on us. The amount of likes you get on your picture, the amount of people who commented on your picture. So that's going to be a big challenge even coming in future, because this is not going to end. And whenever we ask the patients, how much screen time do you have, Oh my God, it's unbelievable. I know homework is on the computer, but along with that, the screen time for surfing the net and looking at things, it's a lot. I think that's going to be one of our biggest challenges, how to curb that. And the other one would be definitely keep lines of communication open, with your children, with your teens, with your adolescents. Keep talking to them, be their friend. I know I was always called the helicopter mom when my son was in college, because I think I was the one probably texting the most. But I think that's where I learned that I need to step back. And I think that's where, but still, be their friend. I think being their friend is really going to be helpful to them. So let's see how things go. But I think that is one of the main important things to take care of.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
Sure.
Dr. Resnick?
Yeah, I definitely am seeing just growing challenges with just like self-esteem, self-love, and I do think social media fuels that. I think sometimes what I see, at least with the population I work with, is a lot of tough love coming from parents, and the love is there, but the tough is hard for the students to get and interpret. And so I am always encouraging in families like levity, fun. We just forget about this. Like things were tough. Things have been tough. It doesn't mean you can't laugh. It doesn't mean you can't smile. Like just bringing levity and fun into families, I'm a huge fan of, and having space for that, where, I'll often ask my students, like, when was the last time you did something fun with your parents? And they're like, I don't know. And so I'm like, well, hello, just have fun together. And that will also open up things and pull away judgment, because you're just enjoying each other. And I think just having space for that is so important, and improves the self-esteem and the self-love, because they're feeling it from others. In terms of hope and hopefulness, something that I really love seeing is, and I'm going way back. I used to work for NAMI a gajillion years ago, and we had like stigma busters where we were trying to work on eliminating stigma against mental illness. And I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that battle has been won, but I do see enormous leaps. That is one benefit of social media. We're seeing celebrities, huge celebrities, talking about, hey, I suffer from this. This is hard for me, and I've been through this. And I feel like that does help open up those doors and those conversations. And students saying, yeah, my family does not believe in, the student saying to me, like, my family does not believe in therapy. They don't think that's okay. You don't air your dirty laundry. But I think it's important, and I'm going to come here and I'm going to get that. And so students advocating for themselves and feeling comfortable fighting back against that stigma is, I think, a really positive thing.
That's great. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Yeah. Mr. Omerso, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'd say as far as my concerns is more of the same. I don't think the pressures are going anywhere. I think social media has opened up new doors for comparison, and also just allowed us to see all the possibilities, right? So kids have a lot of pressure to be the best, to be the next best, to be better and better and better. And I just don't think that pressure is going anywhere anytime soon. So I think we're going to continue to see more of that. And I think we'll continue to see anxiety and depression and suicide and, suicidality. I think we'll still see it. But I'm very hopeful, because I do think the awareness is there. I think that kids are much more aware of how to get help, how to talk about it with their friends. More things are built into schools, more things are, being brought to parents. So I think there's resources available there. I have kids every day that, have told their friends about symptoms, who have come to me because they're concerned about a friend, who went to their counselor because they were concerned about someone. There's more awareness of what the symptoms are. And I'm really hopeful that things will get better because of that.
That's great. Yeah. Dr. Raza, I'm going to open it, finish with you. But before we do this, just a question in the chat about, I guess this goes back to what you were saying earlier about having so much access, but not having the brain developed enough to be able to self-limit, or to regulate. Are there any pieces of advice that any of you might have with respect to the question about how to encourage kids not to be on the computers too much? Or I guess the question here is about games, but I would say social media would fit the bill as well. Any tips for parents to help curb use?
Yeah, that's a tricky one,
I
because
know.
the kids don't want to get off. Sometimes I do think that it's a sort of this balance of firmness, and there's all these other things that have to get done during the day, and they can't possibly get done if there's I've heard kids, these 5 hours of video games or 7 hours or this craziness. And so I think sometimes if you just sit down with the kid and say, you have literally been doing this now for the last 3 hours, and to come up with some kind of an agreement of what you both think is a reasonable amount of time to play on the games on a weeknight versus on the weekend. Because one of the things is, if they're spending that much time online doing whatever, that's just less time that they're doing other stuff that they should be doing, which is actually being out and out and doing things with those same friends that they're scrolling their Instagrams and snapping with, and all of these things that they're doing. So they're in constant communication with their friends, but they're not actually out with them. And so I think the balance comes is when you see a kid who has a nice balance between being online, because that's not, as everyone has said here, that's not going away. So we allow them to be online. We just have a sense of what is it that they're doing online, but that's also balanced with they're actually going out and doing volunteering. They're out with their friends. They're out doing things. They're going out on errands with you. They're going to the malls, like whatever it is, but they're out and they're not just glued into that phone. And so, for the kids who are playing the video games, it's a real big challenging one. But I always like to talk to kids when they're in a good mood. Sometimes that's it's not the best time to get involved in a conversation of, well, what do you think is a good amount of time to be on, playing on your PS5 when they're already irritable and angry and tired and hungry. That's just not that, or they just walked in the door from school. So you want to get them when they're in a good mood, they're doing well, and you just kind of, bring this up and just say, I've noticed that you can do this for 4 hours straight. I don't think that's healthy. And then you come up with a solution of what reasonable time.
Yeah, no, that's good advice, actually. I knew of a parent who had this conversation with their child, and they came up with a plan together as to what, and both were comfortable with it. And then wrote up a contract so that both parties would keep that, and go back to the contract anytime there's any friction about how much time to use. So that's great practical advice. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And now I'm just eager to hear what you think are the major challenges that you foresee for the next year, and then just what you're most hopeful for.
Yeah, so I think the challenge is, if you read through that CDC report, it said that a lot of, back when we were all kids, I don't know that we're all the same age on this call, but, back in the 80s and 90s, the things that all of us grew up hearing about is how you can't drink and drive, overdosing and doing drugs, and drugs are bad, and teenage pregnancy, and, all of these kinds of things were the things that all of us grew up on, these very external kind of things. And interestingly, the rates of those things have gone down. Teenage pregnancy, interestingly, the rates of that have come down over the years. And so now, it's this interesting thing where before the focus was on external, it all came down, great. But then we've seen more lately, since 2010 onward until now, we're seeing these internal problems that are now taking the forefront. So these internal problems like, mental health, depression, suicidal thoughts, self-harm, these are the unfortunate things. Anxiety, again, we don't want to minimize anxiety. I think a large part of kids, in fact, if you want to think, we always think in psychiatry and the world of psychology, we think of you think of the most common things first, and then you go to the other ones. So anxiety by far in kids is the #1 concern. And so often what you're seeing in your kid, the anger, the irritability, the snapping back, screaming at you, is usually anxiety. And then we go to depression next, mood disorders next. And so anxiety is also a big one. I don't want to underplay that one. But so now we're seeing, I think the challenge is that we're seeing a lot of these internalizing conditions coming up, and we're seeing them younger and younger. And we didn't even talk about the 10 to 14-year-olds, which are quite an alarming bunch, because self-harm is the second cause of death in that population, which is shocking. Yeah. And it should really be making, the whole numbers are low, but it has moved up to #2 for, the mortality data. And so that should really make people stand up and just say, okay, what are we doing here? And so that is the challenge, I think, is that the mental health concerns and emotional distress among kids who are going to slowly grow up to be young adults with this, and then they're going to grow up to be adults with this. And so we really have to intervene early. It would be wise not to just wait for the mental health world to do this, because we're, interestingly, DC is, if not #1, #2 in terms of per capita rate of a mental health provider to a person. We're #1 or 2 in the country. So we are very well resourced here, but yet it's still so hard. So imagine places where there's one interest to like 2. That's what the situation. I don't know that we can rely on the emergency rooms. Certainly are not the place to rely on. They are overburdened like you can't imagine. So I think the hope for me is that kind of like what Katy was saying, is that looking for different resources to collectively improve the mental health of young people. And so that will be in school, that will be now I'm blanking. I'm literally losing what I was about to say. So it will be in school, but it'll be in sort of these places where it's not the typical place where you think you have to go to a doctor's office to get mental health. And so I think it's going to be training people who are not necessarily psychiatrists or people who are trained in therapies and they're, PhD level therapists or social workers, but sort of training more people and having more conversations and being more open about all of these different things in our society. I think really, really being aware of and paying attention to the LGBTQIA kids and young adults, and really creating an inclusive, welcoming space for them to exist and just to be, normal kids growing up is really important. And then, of course, all of our kids of color. These kids frequently don't get diagnosed early, or they get misdiagnosed. Black youth, we tend to diagnose them with these externalizing disorders. We say that they're angry or they're oppositional or whatever you have it. But then if you really sit down and you talk, it's actually trauma or it's actual depression or anxiety. And so just, I think paying attention to everybody in our society and seeing everybody as important, and then looking out of the box for where can we intervene that doesn't involve an emergency room, a crisis center, or a doctor's office. Because if we're all going to wait for that, it's not going to happen. So I guess
Agreed.
that's.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, great. Which then I'm just going to remind the audience that we will send out some resources that we've talked about today, which hopefully can be of use to you and to just kind of tuck away in your toolbox as needed. So
There was one question about a kid not wanting, I think it was.
Oh, yes.
There was a question. I just wanted to make sure we address that. So when kids are offered therapy, but the kid is saying, I'm fine. And so I think that's okay. You can't force at some point, I think after middle school or even after 7th grade, you can't physically put them in the car. So either they're going to go or they're not going to go. But I think if they say no, that's okay. But I think it doesn't hurt to keep checking in with them on a regular basis. And again, looking within yourself in the way that your family system operates about talking about things and talking and being non-judgmental. And then maybe that will be an avenue. And plus, sometimes if you talk enough, you realize, okay, maybe he doesn't need to see a therapist, or it becomes very clear that he does. And so opening that door up to talk and checking in even daily, like if they say, no, I'm fine, I don't need to talk, it doesn't hurt a day or two later to come back with it. Not be annoying, but just be kind of like, I'm here if you want to talk about stuff. It just feels like things are tough. I might be wrong. What do you think? Something like that.
So approach,
Keep approaching.
continue,
Yeah.
keep approaching, yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Um,
that's good advice, yeah.
And I always
Okay.
tell parents, we parent to some extent the way we were parented. So if you grew up in a house where you don't talk about this stuff, chances are a third of us will be parents who don't talk about things because it just makes us uncomfortable. A third of us will be like, absolutely not. I'm going to correct this. I'm going to fix it. And then the third of us are kind of a mix. And so sometimes looking inward and seeing, you know, where did I learn how to parent? How do I learn how to parent? How was my parenting with my mom when I was this age? Did I used to talk to my mom or dad or my grandmother, whoever, about stuff? And then sometimes that your solution or your guidance is in there. So.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. So having these cultural predispositions on how we parent and
Or
how,
familial, yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, this has been fantastic. I have learned a lot, and I hope, and I'm sure parents on the call learned a lot as well. I want to thank you for taking time out middle of the week, spending your hopefully, you know, relaxing time with us. And I appreciate you giving us all this input and advice. Thank you so much. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm going to hand it over to Brian. Brian, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you all so much. This has been an absolutely amazing forum, and I've learned a lot as well. So really appreciate the expertise that you all bring. And Shruti, thank you for moderating tonight. Really appreciate it. And want to thank everyone. We've had a great school year, and we'll look forward to our next PTSA meeting in September. So I hope everybody has a great summer. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Everyone
Bye.
have a good night. Appreciate it.